I watched every Fred movie so you don't have to. You asked for this, and God hates you for it. Ah!
Watch me as I think back to 2010's Nickelodeon. What do you remember most? You may say iCarly or Victorious, maybe House of Anubis, possibly even the largely forgotten but better than you remember Fanboy and Chum Chum. But personally, what I remember most is that loud guy from YouTube. I think they call him Fredrich, getting thrown through a table by his imaginary dad that's also John Cena. And if that ain't fatherly love, I don't know what is. And I know a lot of children watch YouTube frequently, and I know some of you will think 2010, that's so long ago, this movie's so old, to which I say, hey, shut up. I'm much older than Fred the movie. Let me put into perspective. I was alive when you used to cut the box tops off the cereal boxes. I was alive when cereal toys still existed. I know a lot of you didn't even know that was a thing at one point. I used to have a cereal box toy that was the Star Wars cereal spoon, and it actually lit up. I miss cereal box toys. Petition to bring them back. Bring those bad boys back, alright? I first played Jetpack Joyride on the PS3. I was 8 when Subway Surfers came out. When I was born, South Park and Family Guy were on their 8th and 4th seasons respectively. I know for a fact at least 80% of the viewers of this video had the same experience as this. But just in case a random 12-year-old finds this video, the fact that you weren't alive or at least cognitive enough to watch Fred 3 when it came out makes me sick. I am 2 years older than the last mass-produced VHS tape. Man, I watched the pilot episode of Yo Gabba Grabba live and I remember it. Fred the movie, otherwise known as the prequel to Dahmer, and I will explain myself with the first bit of cursed media we'll be looking at today. Fred the movie. I once again have to point out he was a YouTube sensation that was just loud. When you think YouTube, you might think Jacksepticeye, ASMR slime videos, fucking Steamboat Willie. Welcome to the public domain. The film begins with Fredrich discussing with a camera that he had the best day at school ever because it's Friday, Fred Day, Friday, Fred Day, Friday, Fred Day, Friday. Fred then mistakes his high school crush Judy as waving at him when she was actually just waving at her friend. However, Fred then proceeds to stalk Judy, disguising himself as bushes, a trash can, laying down and sticking a full tree sapling up his asshole like one guy, one jar. God, I don't even think I can show this on YouTube. Blur it. He then continues to follow Judy all the way home. Number one, because she's his next door neighbor, and number two, because he cannot live a single second without stalking her. You know, regular high school experience. You're telling me you didn't stalk your crush in high school? Did you even fucking go, you fucking loser? I hope you die now. We're introduced to Kevin, Fred's neighbor and arch enemy. He'll come back up later. He gets real crazy towards the end. You'll see. Trust me, we're only getting started. I'm 3 minutes into the Fred the movie. We have 5 more hours of content, give or take, to get through. Fred finally makes it home, and he proceeds to explain that Judy is his girlfriend, and he's getting ready to take things to the next step in his relationship with Judy. And I'm not even a little bit equipped to unpack any of that in any way, shape, or form, so don't ask. And it's now explained that Fred doesn't have a dad, and then he serenades us. I mean, just look at this.
Somebody call 911. Shorty fire burning on the dance floor. Whoa!
Kevin proceeds to bully Fred, and Judy tells him to stop to no avail. And then Fred's head falls off, and he makes cheese fries, as one does. Fred explains that he can't say the D word. Only D word I know is dick. Fred burns his mouth and apparently all of his motor functions as well. Oh god, he's naked. Blur it. Blur everything. God, put a shirt on. I'm gonna get demonetized. Finally done with that. Fred is having a poolside fantasy where Kevin gets arrested while he exclaims his love for Judy. Kid is obsessed. And now we meet Bertha, played by Jeanette McCurdy, not Daniela Monet, you idiot, you stupid little nematode. Anyway, Fred's dad is John Cena, and he says the ruthless aggression line. You can tell the producers were wrestling fans and didn't really know what a Fred was. Fast forward to Kevin dancing in his yard, and he does whatever the hell this is. God, at this point, just blur the whole movie. Blur this video. Matter of fact, blur my Kevin bullies Fred away, and Fred starts crying and runs away. And then he mistakes his mother for Kevin. Fred's mom is possibly an alcoholic, maybe abusive, and definitely neglectful. So Fred talks to his non-abusive father, so he slams him through the table and puts him in a chokehold. Fred tries to get into Judy's yard with the trampoline and then shows us his full ass. This video is getting age restricted, I'm calling it now. Fred starts digging a tunnel to Judy's house and plays with exposed wires, and then screams that he dug a hole to China when he sees 2 Asian children. If that's not racist, I don't know what is, goddammit. Goddammit, what is with this dude and not wearing a shirt? Fred gets an invisibility cloak and tries to beat Kevin to death. Let's see how he does. He does not do well. Fred then dances down the driveway dressed in drag to get past Kevin. Remember, kids, the best way of defeating your enemy is confuse them till they become catatonic. Fred then exclaims, Judy was kidnapped by Asian people. This movie is a lot less progressive than I remember. Fred finds out Judy moves and he throws a temper tantrum because he didn't get a chance to eliminate his victim. Fred then goes through his goth phase and falls asleep till John Cena kidnaps him and starts watching Dora. And Fred looks up Judy's house on Google Maps and looks through the window at a man dropping a fat shit. And Fred explains that he was responsible for a young child's disappearance. Where does the cycle of violence end, Fredrich? Fred continues his crime spree by stealing his mother's Copenhagen money before running away and getting on a bus to go find Judy. And it's in this bus that he gets scared by an Asian woman just sitting there, and we meet Durf. Durf is Fred's cooler, imaginary friend, and wow, it does not feel like I've been watching this for 35 minutes. It feels so much longer. And then Fred thinks his bus driver is going to murder him, and Fred ends up at a pool where he just so happens to run into Bertha for some reason. And he explains he doesn't love showing people his body, which I know is false. I've seen some shit. And he claims his body is too much of a sex appeal. You know, the 15-year-old boy. He has too much sex appeal. I'm just going to skip the whole beach scene because it is just awful. And there's not really a lot I can comment on anyway. Fred proceeds to strip naked in the laundromat and sings a duet with the man running it before getting kicked out. Fred gets a green apple scented car wash and just walks right through it. And then all these grown men wipe down Fred, and him and Judy sing a song by R. Kelly, which, believe it or not, is about sex. Fred finds a squirrel store run by 2 stereotypical gay men, and oh my god, is that Oscar? That's Oscar. What's he doing here? Waiting for them to play Gangnam Style? And he sprays and Oscar sprays his partner in the face with mace. Fred talks to a Mexican and claims that he's gonna get brain rot because he doesn't understand Spanish. So Fred runs as far as he can away from the man, and then they have a bit about dams and how damn is almost a curse word. And this nice security guard warns him that if he goes into the woods he might end up like the child he murdered earlier. Fred now has to traverse the woods after he touches his penis, of course. He runs into a talking deer and gets really scared, and then the deer explains that moose and deer are the plurals of moose and deer. And then they sing a duet, because of course they do. And then Fred finds a little Evan Weiss in the woods. He's not dead after all. And no joke, legit stop the video, this scared the absolute shit out of me as a kid. Even now, because that shit caused nightmares and due to that being traumatic subconsciously, it still gives me the heebie-jeebies. Fred starts waiting for the bus to Judy's house, where he runs into Durf again, before getting on the bus, and then he starts brushing his teeth on the bus, before a lady gives him a squirrel to give to Judy. Fred finally makes it to Judy's house, where Judy says she hates it there, and he gives her the squirrel, and they sit in front of the fireplace, and it's so very romantic in his head. Fred has a series of psychological illnesses, but it's okay, because this one was just a dream. Isn't Fred silly? Anyway, he actually makes it to Judy's house and finds out she's having a party where Kevin's there. And everyone at the party makes fun of him for crashing their party, and Judy also makes fun of Fred and tells him to just leave, before Kevin slaps a slice of pizza on Fred, and Fred throws up on Judy's floor and Judy herself. And Fred runs away from Judy's house, and Judy wants Fred to wait for her, but he's already gone. He's back on a bus to go home, utterly heartbroken, and he licks the pizza stains off of himself. After spending all day searching for Judy, Fred makes it home empty-handed. He's having the worst day of his life and finds out Kevin uploaded a barf remix to YouTube. Remixes were really big on YouTube at the time. And Fred gets really meta saying people who watch others on YouTube are creepy, but the only creep here is Fred. Fred goes to Kevin's house to not invite him to his party, and Kevin yells at his mom that he's on the crapper before coming out of the bathroom asking where the toilet paper is. So my question is, did Kevin put his full underwear and pants back on without wiping his dirty, shit-filled ass? Fred then goes around town telling people that they aren't popular and he doesn't like them, which will forever change their brain DNA and make them think they're not enough. For the rest of their lives, Fred's cycle of harm knows no ends. Fred and Bertha set up their party in a neat montage, all while Fred's alcoholic mother drinks a brewski in her underwear to a song that curses, and it is legit beeped in the film itself. Real classy. This movie, I can't believe it. This movie's still got 10 minutes, and the montage is still going. It's been going for 2 minutes. They even changed the song playing. It goes on way too long, and then the camera fades out, and Fred starts editing together his video and argues with the demons in his head about whether it should be uploaded or not. And then he accidentally uploads it anyway, and then we get to watch the full party video, which is another montage where he kisses his mom and grabs his own ass. And then there's a pink barf montage. This party's montage has also been going for 3 minutes with 2 different songs, and then it cuts to Fred's school and... Wait, does that say middle school? That does say middle school. I thought he was at least 15. Why is he shirtless so much? It then, documentary style, shows every kid in school talking about why they were unable to make it to Fred's party. And then they open Judy's mail before looking at the toilet again, where Judy's mom realizes that she went on a date with Toilet Guy 15 years ago, and Fred says he's 15. So why is he going to middle school? Anyway, this tells us that Toilet Guy is Fred's dad from a one-night stand, and you won't believe this. Judy goes to Fred's house and asks him to hang out with her, while Kevin cries. This one's not even one of Fred's delusions and demons in his head. This one's legitimate in how the film ends. So, in conclusion, Fred Figglehorn is a deranged, abused, neglected, severely mentally ill boy who can barely manage to form a cohesive sentence, and yet he knows how to lure women into his house so he can murder them. Fred needs to be stopped. I can't believe there's 2 more movies. I think I'm going to cry. All of you are terrible for voting for this video. I hate all of you for subjecting me to this. Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. I watched this movie premiere when I was a child. The film begins with Fred coming home from school saying his school is so scary, and he's scared, scarred, scarard. You can't make this shit up. Fred's making himself a Twinkie PB&J sandwich before telling us that he broke up with Judy in Casablanca. In other words, the actress who plays Judy didn't want to do another Fred movie. And Fred explains that his music teacher disappeared without a trace before we meet this movie's villain, the new music teacher, Mr. Devlin. He asks Fred if he likes bulgogi, a man of class I see, and Fred has no idea what that is, which given his track record with Asian people, doesn't surprise me. And now Fred is getting stalked, and he tells us it's uncomfortable. Stalking sucks when it happens to you, huh, Fred? Fred then falls into a kiddie pool where a child pees into his open mouth, and he finds out Mr. Devlin is moving in next door. Now we're introduced to Bertha, played by Daniela Monet, not Jeanette McCurdy, you idiot, you stupid little nematode. Fred tells Bertha he's not afraid of his stalker Talia. So Fred, the upperclassman, begins to hit on Talia, the freshman, and we watch Kevin sing Wang Chung, which is... Anyway, Kevin sees Mr. Devlin as a father figure, and we find out there's a piano recital coming up. And Fred and Kevin have a piano duel, where Fred plays chopsticks and Kevin plays Fior Elise, before Kevin's piano explodes. Back in reality, Fred fails to play Fior Elise, and Bertha smacks Kevin for making fun of Fred. Fred and Talia talk about how terrible Kevin is, and Talia made Fred a chemical cookie of his face. Fred thanks Talia for walking him home, and he says the HE double hockey sticks word, and questions if Talia is a ghost. The ghost of Talia, born in ancient times, 1986, shopped till she dropped, and Fred dives over the banister to join her. It doesn't work so well. Kevin wants a play date with Fred, and Fred and his mother are invited to a party at Kevin's house later that night. John Cena tells Fred he needs to go to the party to do recon, and the cottage cheese is expired. Also, this movie is sponsored by Sunny D. Kevin plays Wang Chung for a second time. Fred's mother immediately falls in love with Devlin, and old Hilda finds out that Mr. Devlin is single. Fred calls Kevin a stupid Robert Pattinson and threatens to piss on Kevin's floor. It turns out Talia is at Kevin's party, and Fred finds out Talia is Kevin's little sister. So Fred runs back to his house and sings a terrible song that made my ears bleed. The delusional Fred looks for his dad in the refrigerator, and Fred goes on a tangent about Devlin's name being Devil. Devlin. Fred brings out his invisibility cloak so he can spy on his neighbor Devlin. Add Peeping Tom to his rap sheet. Fred finds Devlin digging a hole for burying someone, obviously. And Fred makes himself pancakes with the help of Chef Mike. Before discovering Miss Felsen, the old music teacher, crawls out of Fred's pancakes and warns Fred about Devlin before crawling back into the pancakes. Devlin reveals he's an alien, and there's some legitimately good body horror and makeup effects. I'm certain the whole budget went to this. And Devlin sucks Fred dry and turns him into a flat Stanley. Wait a minute. Talia explains to Fred she's lived across from him her whole life. He just never noticed Talia. Talia is in love with Fred, and I think he is too. And Fred eats off-brand Count Chocula. And Fred discovers that Devlin and Kevin are vampires, and then they do Twilight. And Fred is ripped and has a tattoo. And Fred has to fight the vampires for Talia. And he morphs into a Pomeranian and murders Kevin then and there. Fred found fun facts about vampires, the usual silver stakes, crosses, no welcoming them into a hole, yada yada. Fred is forced to invite Devlin into his house because he and his mom have a date that night. Ferdinand picks up Bertha in the Fredmobile, and Fred tells Bertha how hot he is. I mean, he is the definition of sex appeal, as we learned in the first one. And Fred and Bertha sneak into the restaurant and grab uniforms, and Matthew Scott Montgomery tells Fred to get on the grill. And Hector tells him he needs to keep quiet, and Fred says he can make anything taste good. And the car wash employee from the first movie says he won't make his sock taste good. Bertha steals a wig and takes Fred's mom and Devlin's orders, and Devlin likes his steak super rare. It's hard not to like Devlin and his food opinions. I mean, bulgogi, rare steak, hubba hubba. Fred and Hector get scared about vampires before deep frying the sock, and Devlin says he sucks the life out of kids, but Sock Guy says his sock tastes good for his sock, so at least there's that. And Fred and Bertha take the back way home so as to make it a home before his mom and Devlin. And Bertha makes a sex joke. And Hilda also makes a sex joke. This movie is very horny. Anyway, Fred reads about 99 ways to please a man. This video is going to get age restricted. Fred hangs himself out his window so he can spy on Devlin, who's washing his bloody knife with his hose. And Fred sees Devlin looking at him before falling and cracking his skull, and Fred and John Cena have a wrestling match with Kevin and Devlin. I'd be lying if I say I didn't at least a little bit want to be at the SmackDown this was filmed at. God, this is so weird to see after this many years. The wrestling match is fun, but I can't really commentate it for non-wrestling fans. Kevin says he doesn't want to bite Fred because people will think they're dating. Fred wakes up back in his bed before going back to sleep because he has school tomorrow. Devlin asks for Bertha and Fred's blood for the blood drive, and the movie genuinely made me laugh here because Fred says Kevin looks bad, and Kevin runs away mad and says, "I look better than you." I'm not proud of this fact, but it did make me laugh. Talia made hand puppets for Fred and kisses him on the cheek with one of them. John Cena tells Fred to drink Devlin's blood. Suck him before he sucks Fred. Suck down all his ooey gooey blood, and you need to find a baseball player. And Fred threatens to murder Devlin. This is all 100% verbatim. And Fred rides away on his ripstick. And Fredrich finds out Bertha is getting piano lessons from Devlin. And Fred runs into Durf, who doesn't want to help Fred. And Fred steals a street sign, add it to his rap sheet of horrible crimes. And Fred goes to a Chinese restaurant to get only garlic sauce. And Fred intimidates the Chinese woman until she's scared. And I laughed again because Fred opened his fortune cookie and it said, "Your neighbor is a vampire." Either Fred 2 is a good bad movie unlike the first one, or these movies are giving me brain damage. Ferdinand goes into a full auditorium with a loaded gun. A water gun, but still, would you really be that shocked if given his rap sheet? Fred then has his face off with Devlin, and he murders Kevin with garlic sauce. And kills Devlin as well. And oh my god, I just realized Talia is Alex from Modern Family. Anyway, it was all in Fred's head, of course. And he goes back into the auditorium with the garlic sauce, and Fred starts shooting everyone in the auditorium, including Talia, and Devlin is cowering for his life off to the side. And yep, that settles it. This is actually a good movie. And Talia is now terrified of Fred, rightfully so, but Mr. Devlin invites Fredrich to dinner at his house, and well, I'll get demonetized if I say the words, but I'll just say there are some implications there. And Fred has his devil, if you combine Kevin with devil, you get Devilin. And Fred live streams his dinner with Mr. Devlin and finds him playing the piano, and he says he's got a dinner for him he's never heard of, and goddamn it, I laughed again, because Kevin's friend Diesel is just casually sitting on his toilet watching this stream, and Mr. Devlin and Fred dig up kimchi, and Fred finds a room with vampire bats and a hidden room where he goes into another door and finds Devlin's butchery, which admittedly does look a little dungeony. Like, Devlin's for sure planning something here. And Devlin shows up behind Fred holding a katana and wearing a ritualistic garb. And then Mr. Devlin explains what bulgogi and kimchi are to Fred. And turns out Mr. Devlin was actually just a big fan of Korean food this whole time, and explains that his dad was in the military and was stationed in South Korea. It was all one big misunderstanding. And piano makes Mr. Devlin feel accepted, and he becomes kind of like an actual father figure to Fred, which is honestly a lot more wholesome than I was expecting. And it turns out Mr. Devlin got fired because of the live stream. Fred did. And Talia kisses Fred on the cheek, and Kevin says thank you to Fred, but Fred isn't so excited. He goes to Mr. Devlin's house to say sorry, and Fred gets kind of excited about the amount of views on his video, and has another fight with the demon in his head, and eventually deletes the video. Fred's mom comes home with a lot of food, and Fred says you promised you'd quit, which is, oh my god, that's an actual reference to substance abuse. And then Fred has a mental breakdown before realizing he should make people think he's a vampire, so Devlin can have his life back again. And for the second movie in a row, Fred and Bertha have a montage where they fake a video. So Fred and Bertha set up their vampire video while his mom sleeps. It's pretty much the same as the first movie's montage, except more Halloween-y, and honestly, I had a lot more fun watching this montage. It even only has one song instead of two, and they invite Talia into the garage for the preparation, and Bertha explains what Mr. Devlin did, and that everyone is weird, and some people just pretend they're not. And Talia and Bertha talk about whether or not Bertha is Fred's girlfriend, and Fred looks great as a vampire, and and we find out Kevin makes Talia judge his fart smells, which is just wow. Kevin finds out that Devlin has Kevin's sister, and he's organized like a vampire lynch mob. So this group tries to murder Devlin, and I gotta say, I really like the Diesel character, and Fred says they're gonna scare the shit out of them, but it's with vampire teeth, so it's muffled. And Diesel tells Kevin to, quote, get out of their town. Is the movie about racism? Fred comes out of his garage holding Talia, but he has to take a break. And Bertha tells Kevin to drive a stake through Fred's heart. And he says, why can't we make a grown-up do it? And I laughed again. I've laughed more than I ever did on the first one, so that's something at least. Anyway, Kevin stabs Fred, and a lot of blood spews into his face, and Kevin gets sad he killed Figglehorn, before Fred jump scares Kevin, and he runs away screaming and crying. And Fred and Devlin share a smile, and Fred celebrates that they saved Devlin's career. And John Cena gives Fred another Sunny D, and it turns out Devlin is gonna continue to leave, and he thanks Fred for all he's done, and then shakes his hand, and Fred and Bertha are walking down the street, and they start flirting together. Fred's mom and Devlin go on another date, and Fred finds out Mr. Devlin is actually legitimately a vampire, and that's how the movie ends. God, what a movie. I might actually legit end up watching this movie again next Halloween and add it to my yearly tradition of shitty made-for-TV children's Halloween specials that I watch every year. This feels weird to say, but if you haven't seen Fred 2, go watch it. I'm actually excited for viewing Fred 3 because I only watched it once and I remember nothing. See you in Fred 3! Fred 3. The film begins with Fred singing a song about how great the day is because it's the last day of school before his mom berates him for singing. And then it cuts to the high school where the whole school does a high school musical. And Fred stomps on cafeteria food, and then it's him in a marching band, and it's 2 minutes long, and the only lyrics are, "The best day of school, it's the last day of school," for 2 minutes. And then it turns out this was all in Fredrich's head. As always, Kevin blows a spitball at Fred, and now Fred and Bertha, played by Daniela Monet, not Daniela Monet, you idiot, you stupid little nematode. Fred and Bertha are walking down the street, and Fred is telling Bertha how much he wants to go to Camp Superior, the greatest summer camp in the entire galaxy. And now Fred is packing for his camp trip. Fred tells his mom he loves her, and Fred finds out he's actually not going to Camp Superior because it's too expensive. And he is, in fact, going to Camp I Wanna Pee-Pee. Fred then dies and fails to get revived. And Fred throws a temper tantrum in the front yard, and Fred's mom tells him to try and to have fun, even if this isn't what he was excited for, because he's a brave boy. The bus driver and Fred's mom force him onto the bus, which is admittedly kind of funny, and Fred screams because he doesn't want to go, and his scream lasts for 60 full real-time seconds, and it is absolutely unbearable. Fred shows up to the camp, and the owner says he wants to pee-pee on all of the children. Fred goes to the camp cafeteria, where they serve gruel, and Fred learns the bus driver is also the lunch lady, and a pre-livin' Maddie, Joey Bragg, invites Fred to the nerd's bunk, and they all have a crush on the camp nurse, Oksana. Fred meets Magoo's friends Dig and Spoon before learning the owner has a mosquito bite, and the camp has no trophies despite competing for 69 years before learning there's a I Wanna Pee-Pee prophecy, and he's not the chosen one. And Fred meets an old guy in the woods named Scary Gary, and Fred gets introduced to his cabin in the outhouse, where the bus driver tells us he once fell into the toilet, and Fred tells us he hates it here. Fast forward to that night where Ferdinand begins to tunnel out of the cabin and into the wilderness. Fred crawls up from the ground, and the FBI point their guns at Fred, and the bus driver is also in the FBI, and Fred learns the punishment for escapers is cannibalism. And then Fred wakes up with a regular voice, and Scary Gary is Fred's mom, and then Fred actually wakes up to the counselor's I Wanna Pee-Pee radio show, and the kids learn that the lake is full of chemicals, and John Cena crawls out of his abandoned fridge. John puts Fred in a headlock and body slams him twice, and then John Cena says he hates the camp before he tells Fred he's on his own. And Fred's mom is getting a massage from the pizza guy. The gang finds Fred crying in the woods, and Fred rubs poison ivy all over his face and learns about the rat hole. I'm not explaining that further, you should just know what that is. And to help his rash, Fred is prescribed toothpaste. Flash forward to the fire pit, where the counselors in Scary Gary tell horror stories, where in 1988, Fred finds a crocobaramoose, which is half bear, half crocodile, half moose, and all ferocious. And Fred makes fun of the name, and the crocobaramoose spawns in behind him, and Fred gives it breath spray, so it decapitates him. Pretty reasonable trade. And the crocobaramoose spawns behind him, and Fred beats it with a stick until he finds out it's just the bus driver, and then continues to beat the shit out of him regardless, and temporarily paralyzed him. And Fred finds the gang going to the rat hole. Fred writes a letter to his mom about how much he hates this camp, and that people are getting sick from the chemical spill, and they're putting pills in the gruel. And Fred needs to get to the bottom of this. And Fred thinks the rat hole is where they're turning kids into rats. Stupid. Obviously, that's not what the rat hole is. I mean, everyone knows what the rat hole is. And we get some real horror. Fred's mom is tanning with the pizza guy and the rat. And Fred starts eating grass and bark before finding some berries that Fred begins chowing down on. And then Fred has hallucinations, but not normal ones. No. He's high. And Fred finds Crocobaramoose, who asks Fred if he wants to rap with him. And it's quite a song that I listen to. And Fred throws up on us. And then the bus driver asks Oksana out, and Magoo wants to show Fred what I Wanna Pee-Pee has to offer. And they take Fred to the rat hole, which is a staple of everyone's home, called 1-800-RAT-HOLE. That's 1-800-RAT-HOLE. 1-800-728-4653. The rat hole has everything one needs: cheese fries, sandwiches, duffel bags, and a DJ booth. Come on down to the rat hole. Fred finds an explosive named El Diablo, which literally translates to super sucker. So they light that sucker, and it sucks its way all the way through the woods, and it explodes the porta potty. Fred tells the gang that I Want a Pee-Pee sucks, and Camp Superior is betterer, and the gang rightfully breaks up with him. It's time for the games. And Fred finds out the leader of the Camp Superior is Kevin, and yet again Diesel steals the show, and Kevin challenges Freddy to the dance-off. And this drives Fred to compete in the games for everyone who's ever been bullied or picked on. The Camp Superior bus arrives on I Want a Pee-Pee campgrounds, and everyone has a face-off, and the games begin with the javelin toss, where Fred murders Hugh and adds to his rap sheet of horrible, violent crimes. And Fred says they never needed him, and Fred gives the gang a pep talk, and they proceed to fail in all the games. After that, Camp Superior was up 70-0, a slight lead. Kevin makes fun of Fred as he usually does, and Diesel steals the show. Fred tries to tell everyone they're the best at being the worst, which is about as much of a compliment as saying you're more handsome than Glenn after his meetup with Negan. Technically, yes, it is a compliment, but is it though? They proceed to start winning. And the next two games are direct references to Revenge of the Nerds, which is not a very good movie. And then they chant to dig your hole, call 1-800-RAT-HOLE. Then it's all on Fred to win. And Fred talks to his monkey butler, and oh my god, I don't ever want to see that eldritch horror ever again. And Fred gets a perfect bullseye, and the camp owner says that Fred is the chosen one, just like the greats. Anakin Skywalker, Junie Cortez, Daryl from the incinerator at the dump. And now it's time for the final game in the decathlon, which is a song write-off. And Kevin raps, and it sounds quite possibly like My Big Toe. And Simon Cowell gives Camp Superior 7 out of 10. And now it's Fred's turn, but Kevin has a gruel blaster set up his sleeve, and Fred is very auto-tuned, and it's also one of the worst pieces of media I've ever been forced to endure. I almost don't even want to edit this portion because I don't want to look at this anymore, ever again. And Kevin tells Diesel to launch the gruel. This movie is just Camp Rock, but without the talented Demi Lovato and with a Fred. Not a very good trade. And Kevin wants to launch the gruel, but it's malfunctioning, and they finish the song, and Simon Cowell gives I Want a Pee-Pee a 10, and they win the games, and Diesel is trying to suck and blow, so he sucks Kevin all nude. Oh, God, no. And there's one final roll call for the last day of camp, and now it's time to fill the rat hole, everyone's least favorite time of the year. Call 1-800-RAT-HOLE for an inquiry. Remember, the rat hole is only available for 2 weeks out of the year. If you don't fill in the rat hole, they will come for you. And you're not ready for that. The owner says he wants to pee-pee on all the kids again, and he'll miss those sweet children. And Fred's mom picks up Fred with her new boyfriend, the pizza guy, and Fred says he needs to take a shit. And that's how the movie ends. So in conclusion, the Fred movie trilogy is a completely unhinged nightmare full of bad writing, annoying characters, lack of art, lack of good direction, and most egregiously of all, the most heinous villain in all of cinema history, Fredrich Theodore Figglehorn. I hope he rots in prison. That being said, I rank the films thusly. Fred 2, genuinely a really fun movie, and so it's number 1, and it's not even remotely close. The other two are hardly even movies. Fred the movie is abhorrent, obnoxious, and just unfun, and oddly traumatizing. And so it belongs at number 2. Fred 3 Camp Fred, a bad attempt at a follow-up to a good sequel. It doesn't have the heart, the laughs, or the uncanny nature of the other two Fred movies. And usually I exaggerate feelings for videos to make a point hit harder, but this is my genuine opinion, 100%. Fred 3 is the worst of the bunch, and it was really sad to see, especially since, other than the one scene in the very beginning, John Cena is absent from the movie. It's hard to watch, but it was worth it for this video. I want to thank everyone who has given us support, and all of our viewers. You're the real ones. And I know this is a shameless self-promo, but we've been working our asses off to be the best we can be. And we hope to make it on YouTube one day. But for that to happen, we need your help. Please join us on Patreon and join our channel's member page. The link to our Patreon will be in the bio. please consider subscribing to the lowest tier. Is just $1 every month, and you'd be helping us out a lot. So if you're in a giving mood, and most importantly, if you have the money to give and want to help out a smaller creator, please consider subscribing to our Patreon. You won't regret it. Also, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and the notification button. We have a lot of content planned for your amusement this year, and we really don't want you to miss out. And I want to get this out of the way. I will never watch Fred the TV show or a single Fred video unless this video gets 200 likes. This video will probably only get 700 views, and I know for a fact the chances of 200 of them hitting the like button is close to 0. So how does it feel to get absolutely ratioed? So, yeah. Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
By the sea, by the sea, by the beautiful sea, you and I, oh how happy we'll be. When each wave comes a-rolling in, we will duck or swim, and we'll float and fool around the water, over and under and